with that, I'm just going to dive on in. My name is Nick Merriam, and I am the CEO of sea.citi. We are a network of tech companies out promoting civic and community engagement. We do a number of different things in the community, including these events, our Roadmap to Recovery series. We took a period of time off. This was something that we started back in spring as the pandemic hit, and people were looking for virtual ways of connecting with others and connecting with community, and we spun them up. We took a break over the summer because we wanted to break over the summer. I don't have a good reason for it. It was just the thing that we did. So we took a little break, and now that we're back into coming into fall time, we are back in action, and we have fantastic speakers for you guys set up all through the end of the year. Today, we're going to be talking to Kendall from King County Elections, and she's fantastic. So just a quick other bit about sea.citi. If you like this content, we really encourage you to share our invites with others, especially those in your office. We really focus on bringing community content to folks working in tech. It's especially geared for that group, and these events, because they're virtual, we've opened them up to everybody. So anybody that you think would find this content interesting, feel free to share the invite. So I'm happy to have Kendall Hodson, Chief of Staff of King County Elections, with us today. So Kendall has a huge job at King County Elections and directs external affairs, intergovernmental relationships, stakeholder relations, as well as language services and community engagement. She oversees communication, marketing, budget development, and coordinates strategic initiatives and special projects. Prior to being at King County Elections, she served as a senior manager in the county's Central Human Resources Division and as a strategy and policy analyst for the King County Executive's Office. She has a master's degree in public policy from Harvard, and we are just delighted to have you here, Kendall. So first, can you just give us a quick overview of King County Elections? Who are you guys?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I kind of regret just copying and pasting that bio from the internet. It was kind of awkward to have you read it all out, but I'm very thrilled to be here. Thank you guys for having me. Just a quick overview of King County Elections. So we oversee elections for nearly 1.4 million voters in the King County area. We also do elections for 191 jurisdictions. That surprises people sometimes, but it's everything from your city council, your school board, all the way to, we have a cemetery commission, we have sewer commissions, fire chiefs, all those kinds of things. So we run lots and lots of elections. We are headquartered in Renton, Washington. We've got about 65 to 70 permanent employees, and then for an election like this year, we'll hire as many as 500 temporary staff to come help us process ballots and operate vote centers across the county. I was kind of thinking through what would be helpful to share here, but you guys, the presidential election is just 53 days away. I don't know if that feels like it is too far away for some of you because you want it to be over with, but for us, it feels really right around the corner. So one thing that we're really excited about is we think it's going to be a record-breaking year. We've actually issued a challenge to King County voters to hit 90% turnout, which would be a record. I think the current record right now is from 2012, where we hit 85% turnout, but we've just really blown through all of our projections in recent elections. Just for context, in the 2016 primary election, we had about 37% turnout, and in this year's primary, we had 56% turnout. So voters just kind of blew all of our projections out of the water. So we're really excited for everyone to make their voice heard this year. I'm going to start just a couple of key pieces of information. Then, Nick, I want to really just answer your questions, probably more than anything else. But I want to make sure I get it out there. The ballots will be mailed October 14th. If you don't see yours by the 19th, you should give us a call. One of our most important messages is to vote early this year. That's going to really help us get ahead of any USPS issues, which we can talk more about, but it also really lets us have meaningful results on election night. Typically we post around 55 to 60% of total results on election night. So it's really everything we have in hand through that Monday before election day. So the more that we can get in early, the more that we can have in that first night's result. And I think that's going to be really helpful here and then across the country to have those ballots in early. Kind of the final thing that I'll just note is we've got 72 now ballot drop boxes across the country. Or across the county, sorry. The newest is in South Seattle College. We've got one in Carnation and then in Black Diamond as well. 96% of our voters live within 3 miles of a drop box. And then in more dense areas like the city of Seattle, it's actually more like 3/4 of voters live within a mile of a drop box, which we're really excited about. And I think that was most of my overview. We can talk a lot more about security, about the Postal Service, kind of all the things that I think have been circulating in the news. So I'm delighted to be here and happy to talk through whatever you guys are interested in talking about.
Well, elections indeed seems unusually hot this year. 90% turnout is absolutely incredible. And I'm already going to go off script here, but do other communities vote at that level? Do you see that level nationally? Is that a turnout number that happens?
I think voter behavior really changes depending on the year. So in a presidential election, we'll see pretty high turnout across the country. We do tend to have higher turnout. I want to say we were 7th in Washington state in the 2018 midterms. So we're very reliably kind of in that top 10, and those top 10 states usually have things like same-day voter registration, which we now have in Washington state. You'll typically see the other vote-by-mail states like Colorado, like Oregon, usually in that top 10 turnout range. So we do typically see quite a bit higher turnout than a lot of the country. I will say where we actually even have higher turnout, though, is in those kind of local election years and primaries. So that 56% turnout in this primary is just bananas. Even in an engaged year like this one, you're not seeing that across the country. That was bananas in King County this year.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about the primaries and especially in a time of COVID. How have you guys had to adjust the way in which you've been working specifically to handle ballots and run elections? And maybe you can use the primaries as a case study here.
Yeah, I think it was actually fascinating because we were in the middle of a presidential primary when COVID happened. It was actually really, really bizarre because we were at this kind of crossroads of being the epicenter of an epidemic as well as kind of a key early-ish presidential primary state. So we were, I don't know if I want to call it lucky or unlucky enough to have, all of your national news outlets on site when we were trying to figure this out as we went. But we have learned a lot between that presidential primary and the one in August. We've learned a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, there's no way to process ballots remotely. We do have a lot of our permanent staff and our staff who are doing customer service on the phone working from home still, but there's really no alternative other than to have a whole bunch of people come into a building to physically process ballots. Every single one is signature verified and scanned and sorted and opened on the second floor on a secure space in our headquarters. We had 160 temporary staff there for the primary, and what that looks like is lots of plexiglass, lots of barriers, one-way hallways, temperature screens when folks are coming in, and really just getting as many folks out of the building as we possibly can. So a couple things we did is we did just open 2 vote centers. Typically we'd have more like 6, but we felt really only confident we could operate 2 safely, not knowing what we were really doing yet. So we opened 2. One was in CenturyLink Event Center, which was amazing, and then at our headquarters. And for a lot of those, we did a lot of curbside service. We did something we've been trying to do for years. I think this is the silver lining of COVID is we've been wanting to do pre-order and curbside pickup of replacement ballots for years. And of course, this happens. It's not a choice anymore. And we figured that out really quickly, and our voters loved it. Really kind of thinking about different ways to serve people. Trying to keep people in their cars or doing as much as they can online. A lot of folks don't know that if you lose your ballot, you can actually go online, access your exact ballot and print off a replacement. So we've done a lot of kind of messaging and advertising around that as well. So we definitely learned a lot. We'll be opening back up to probably 6 or 7 vote centers for the presidential election. And, it's a lot of hand sanitizer is kind of the name of the game.
Lots of hand sanitizer and lots of masks. One thing I'm really curious about is how has ballot handling actually changed, or can you talk us through a little bit more of the specifics there? I noticed one of the things that you said was that for processing ballots, those were temporary workers, not necessarily volunteers. And I'm also curious as to ballot drop boxes, like who's grabbing ballots out of drop boxes? How do they get transported? Can you talk us through some of that?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, so everyone who works for us is a paid employee. I think that is different than a lot of places, but it's actually if anyone's interested and wants to take some folks even take breaks from their regular jobs to come work for us for a couple of weeks every election just because they love the experience. But so everyone is paid. What usually those folks come in for a couple of weeks, usually starting right around when ballots are mailed, and they'll stay usually through the week of the election to kind of wrap everything up. Every ballot kind of goes through 4 key steps. So the first thing it does is it gets sorted and scanned into this giant machine that is actually mail house equipment, like if you were at the post office. And what that does is 2 things. One, it tells us we've received this person's ballot, don't accept any other ballots from us. And that's actually the moment where you can go online and track your ballot and see that we've received it. The other thing it's doing is taking a picture of that voter's signature. So it's amazing. It goes so fast. It's 40,000 ballots an hour. And it takes a quick picture of the voter's signature. And then that's really the second step is actual human beings verify every signal signature compared to the one that we have on file for that voter. So typically that is however you registered. So if you went to the Department of Licensing or you registered online, that's usually gonna be the signature that's on the back of your license. If you fill out a paper form, it's whatever you signed on that paper form. One kind of fun fact or thing folks can think about is if you are at all worried about your signature, we'll keep as many as you want on file. So if you're like, I think it might have changed, I don't want to have a challenge issue, you can actually just print off a paper form, sign it, and send it back to us, and we'll add that to your file of signatures to compare to. The third step is they actually get opened by human beings. So there's a giant group of people now sitting 6 feet apart, pulling ballots out of envelopes. And then the last step is it gets scanned. And it really, those are just kind of your classic kind of printer scanning machines where it's taking a digital image of that ballot. And then all of that data gets stored, disaggregated on our secure servers in our tabulation room. And that all kind of stays there. You have to have a fingerprint to access that room. I'm actually not allowed to access that room. Neither is our elected director. And then at 8 p.m. on election night, after we've already been processing ballots for a couple weeks, we're going to run the program to aggregate all of that data, and that's where results come from. So that's kind of the ballot processing process, really high level. If folks are interested, we do actually have live webcams running whenever we're processing ballots, so you can go online and watch each part of the process if you are into that. What was the second? Oh, Dropboxes. So the other question, Dropboxes, as soon as those are opened, they actually get emptied every single day by teams of 2. So anytime we're handling ballots, we're doing it in a team of 2. Those are staff that are trained, they work for us, and they're emptying those every single day during the election period. For our busier boxes, we went, I think, to the Ballard box and the Seattle Central box 5 times on election day because they're just so busy. We had 240,000 ballots come back in boxes on election day. So we love them. They're 1,000 pounds. We had one get hit by a school bus once. I can attest that the box and the ballots were fine. The school bus fared a little bit less well, but yeah, they're a great resource. Our voters love them.
One quick question from the audience is,
Yeah.
what percentage of signatures get challenged in any given election?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's going down. We really do our best to kind of approach it from we'd like to accept this signature perspective. Usually it's about under 1% is where we're at lately. And that is both people who forgot to sign and people who had it mismatched. So it's both of those. And then usually about half of those get resolved. It varies a little bit by the election. But usually, we'll email you, we'll call you, we'll send you a letter if we have that information. Well, we'll definitely send you a letter because we have your address, but we'll call and email you if we have that for you and say, hey, your signature was challenged, please follow up with us. And usually about half of those get resolved. If you are tracking your ballot online, which everyone can do really easily, that's another great thing to do because it will show up immediately if there's an issue with your signature, and you can actually print off the form, sign it, and you can even just email it back to us right then and there to take care of that.
Yeah, and another quick question from the audience is, does Nahomish follow similar protocols around signatures and adding signatures?
Yeah, that's going to be true across the state. So one
Okay,
thing that is, I think, actually really lovely is election laws are really create a lot of continuity across the state. So yeah.
great. So kind of shifting over to some of the things that we've seen in the news around USPS and all sort of the drama around election security. Can you just talk a little bit about how King County is preparing for this election?
Yeah, I think the good news is that we are possibly the best positioned jurisdiction in the country in the state, just because we've been doing this for so long. So even other vote by mail states like California or Colorado still rely really heavily on in-person service, and our voters really, before we even went fully to vote by mail, had transitioned there themselves. So we had 85% of King County voters had already elected to receive their ballot absentee when we transitioned in 2009. So our voters really are used to this. They've been doing it for a long time. What that means is we've had a decade-long relationship with our USPS representatives locally. So we get really detailed delivery data from them. We meet with them on a daily basis during an election period. So we're really able, I think, to get ahead of issues if there are any. The other good news is we haven't seen any issues yet. I know there's been a lot of kind of attention in the press and in the media and out there, but the reality is in the primary election, we saw really regular delivery times. So we saw 99.96% of ballots delivered within 5 days of mailing, which is really very normal. So I think people should absolutely, we'll stay on top of it. People should be paying attention, but we'll be ahead of any issues that happen. But I will say it is also why we are encouraging folks to mail their ballot back early. To make sure that that's not going to be an issue. The other thing I'll add we're excited about, this is kind of a nerdy election thing, but we are also going to add a unique barcode to all of our return envelopes. And what that lets us do is actually really in detail track transit time for those return ballots. We do this already for our outgoing ballots. That's what lets us know right now what our delivery time percentages are. But we're gonna do that for return envelopes as well as a new option with the Postal Service. So that'll also let us have a really good sense of if we're seeing issues early, so we can start changing our messaging or giving voters instructions on what they should do to make sure their vote gets in on time.
And quick follow-up question on that. What percentage of ballots are returned via Dropbox versus mail?
It's been all over the map, in part because we kind of keep changing options on voters. So when my boss, Julie Wise, was the director of elections, when she took office, we only had 10 drop boxes. And we saw really, not even 20% of ballots coming back to drop boxes. Now that we're up to 72, it changed pretty quickly when we started adding boxes. But then when we added prepaid postage, we saw some folks go back to mail. So it's really kind of vacillated over the last couple of years. We've, in the primary, and I want to say in the last general election, we were about 50-50 is kind of where voters seem to have settled into. We usually see most folks using it, which is good. They should use it that Monday or Tuesday of election week. We really recommend if you're not going to mail it by that Friday before, you should really find a Dropbox. So about 50-50, I guess, is the short answer.
I personally really enjoy going to the Dropbox. It feels reminiscent of when I was very young and able to go to a polling station, and you sort of see neighbors or other community members coming by and dropping their ballots in. It just has a really lovely community spirit to it. So that's my personal preference. So
We
anyway,
hear that from lots of folks.
yeah. I want to,
Just don't
one of
wait till
the
7:59 is the main thing. We have lots of people running up at 7:59, which is just not a good strategy.
Well, a lot of the folks that are standing there are always so kind and gracious when you're when a lot of the workers are very kind and gracious as you're rushing to drop a ballot in. So one thing we've been using these events to talk about is there has been a lot of movement around racial justice and Black Lives Matters, and we want to use this platform as a space to talk about some of those issues. And from your standpoint, how does King County Elections think about social justice and equity in our elections?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons I love my job and I'm so grateful to work for my boss is she really believes, and I don't think this is true necessarily of administrators across the country, that her job is to remove barriers from voting. So since she took office, that's really been what she's interested in. So that is what I get to do a lot of thinking about every day is how do we remove barriers to voting? So it's really a lens through which we make really all of our decisions. So when we first expanded Dropboxes and have since, that was a key criteria. So we really looked at prioritizing historically disenfranchised communities, areas that also happen to typically be low turnout or low voter registration rates, to put ballot drop boxes in. We worked with our county's equity team to kind of identify those areas and prioritize them. We do the same thing when we're doing advertising. We're really trying to make sure that we're connecting and investing money and connecting with those voters who might be, from historically marginalized communities. So that's a huge piece. The other thing that I think we started when Julie took office, and that we have just been elated by the engagement and the results of, is our voter education fund. So this is a program that we do in collaboration with the Seattle Foundation, where we just recently provided about $1 million in grants to community-based organizations to do voter education and outreach in their respective communities. So we've got 39 partners this cycle, and they are doing everything from holding candidate forums for their community. So just next week, we're going to be headed to a Disability Rights Washington candidate forum, where that community is going to get to ask the candidates for various offices about their issues. We've seen our partners, produce voters pamphlets that are specific to their community. We've seen, them do all sorts of different really creative get out the vote and voter outreach and education events. So I think it really goes into a lot of what we're thinking, since we really believe that our mission is to really help everyone have their voice heard.
Yeah, well, thank you. Those sound like really great and strong initiatives, and it's heartening to hear that you're reaching into those marginalized communities in that way. This being a tech group, before we end, I do want to talk about an election that you guys helped run a little while ago. And can you just talk about how new technology is changing elections?
Yeah, and technology is really kind of the backbone of elections. It is changing. We have to kind of constantly monitor it, both from a cybersecurity and from a process efficiency perspective. So we did do a pilot recently with the King Conservation District. They do not follow the same laws as we do, so it's really their election, but we did test out kind of more of a mobile voting strategy, where folks could sign on their device with their finger or their stylus and submit their ballot back electronically. What we learned is, I think, that the public's not quite ready for that, because there was a lot of absolute panic around mobile voting. But the technology worked great, I think, is what's interesting about it. So there's a lot of concern about verifying signatures, and that worked actually just fine. And a lot of, especially our younger voters, or more, I think, tech interested voters, really liked it. So I think that was a really great learning opportunity. There's other stuff that we're constantly looking at. So we've got a cool app that we've been working on that lets us track our ballot Dropbox driver teams, for example, and maximize their routes so that they can pick up as many locations as quickly as possible. We've been interested for a number of years in some technology, or some, I guess, code that Denver developed that is a different way to gather signatures for petitions. So it's an app that lets petitioners in the field actually figure out if that voter right then and there is eligible to sign for that petition. So that's a really neat use of technology as well. And then I'll just throw out there, since you've got some folks who are thinking about this stuff, I think the next really big challenge is a different way to authenticate voters. Signatures, I think, are okay and have served Washington well, but I know Julie and I are both really interested in what's a different strategy for that, because we're not seeing signatures used as much anymore. For our disability community, for our overseas voters, for lots of folks, that's maybe not the best fit. So I think that's going to be the next interesting challenge, is different ways to verify that you are the voter that you say you are.
Well, there's probably some budding entrepreneurs here in the group that might come back to you with some ideas. I just heard a business proposition right there. That's what I heard. So one final question from the audience before we wrap up here. Somebody's asking about how voting from mail here, or voting by mail here in Washington, has been really fantastic. And how are those learnings and those lessons being shared more broadly across the nation?
That's a great question. We've gotten tons of inquiries since both the pandemic and just, we do anyway, but it's been tenfold probably since. So we've kind of put together a whole set of best practices and even artwork and processes and procedures that we've kind of shared with a number of jurisdictions across the country. So, you know, we're kind of available and trying to share that information as much as possible. So it's a great question.
Great, great. So, and our final question, as we do with everybody, is other than voting, what is something that somebody can do to get engaged in local elections? If they care about elections, if they care about ballot security, what should they be doing right now?
Yeah, can I say a couple of things? I know we're about out of time, but I think
Absolutely.
first and foremost, check your registration now, make sure that everything's accurate. One thing we're encouraging folks to do is to even set an alarm or a notification on your calendar to make sure you've gotten your ballot by October 19th. And if you haven't, call us, track your ballot. And then a really key one is to help your friends and family and other random people make a plan to vote and do all these same things. We've got some great tools on our website, kind of social media content and graphics and different things that you can share and that you can help to promote voting and help everyone have their voice heard. And then I'll just add, while this election, there will be tons of attention on, don't just vote this year. Our local elections are absolutely critically important. So I think really if we can keep this enthusiasm and folks can get in this habit of making sure they're voting in their local elections as well, do that, run for office, do all the things. So, yeah.
Well, we love local elections, so we're actually putting together some voter material for this year's election season. King County has a number of initiatives coming up on the ballot, and so for anybody that's on the event today, you can always watch for that by making sure that you're subscribed to our email list or watching us on social media. Kendall, it has been such a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for coming. This was super enlightening, and I found it particularly interesting. So we really appreciate you coming, and thanks to everybody that showed up today. Remember to follow us on Twitter, sign up for our newsletter, and please, please, please don't forget to vote. All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Kendall.